What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast and apologies for the slightly later video than usual. It took me absolutely ages to find an Orthworm raid today after the event started, so that set me back way more than I was expecting, and unfortunately everything else just got pushed back quite a bit. But in this video, I'm of course going to be showcasing Orthworm, and to be completely honest, this Pokemon it's fine, I guess. It's got decent bulk, it's a pure steel type Pokemon, which is great, but its moveset is all non-stab. Obviously Mud Slap and Rock Tomb both got nerfed this season, so it really doesn't hit hard at all, and it kind of just feels quite boring to use. It's slow and clunky and it relies on debuffs, so it's not the usual fast-paced action that you expect to see on the channel. So to balance that out, I'm using the buffed Shadow Excadrill, which is basically the complete opposite in terms of its stats, its pacing, its damage output, but with the exact same type coverage. Now in the lead, I'm running Shadow Kingdra. Initially, I tried to run Shadow Latios, but it just feels like that psychic typing really hinders it in the current meta, so I quickly subbed it out. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What's an unpopular opinion you have about the Go Battle League? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Kingdra into my least favorite Pokemon of all time, Wigglytuff. I'm going to be swapping out into Orthworm, and we're met with a Furret. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that, I don't know why, but this Pokemon's name is really tripping me up trying to say Orthworm. I keep on, often saying Orthworm or something like that. I think it's because I'm pronouncing the Orth, knowing that usually I would say Earthworm. It's tripping up, the latter part of the word as well, so I might just call it the Worm from now on. Either way, we just barely get taken out by a Swift there, which is really frustrating. That is resisted damage. You can see my IVs, they're not the best. Obviously, it is just a raid IV Pokemon. But anyways, we're going to see their final Pokemon, of course. They've got Wigglytuff in the lead. It was always going to be a Jellicent in the back, but we can go for Drill Run, dealing big damage, and the opponent throws straight away. They do not throw on good timing, which means, actually, if they do the same thing a second time around, potentially in the 2-shield scenario, since, of course, they have just let that first move go through, I can just double shield and commit to a full Mudshot farm down. Now this is going to be really close here. Can we get the farm down? We actually get the perfect farm down, and now all I need to do is live one more charm, and it looks like I will be able to do that. So I'm actually going to bank the energy, as we've already got an Octazooka banked on the Kingdra, going straight for it here. Octazooka does actually get a debuff there. It makes literally no difference here. The opponent, well, they're barely not going to get the KO. That still doesn't make a difference there, because we've got the Drill Run already banked, and Drill Run from Shadow Excadrill will be enough damage to get the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I see Shadow Kingdra into a Dunsparce. So this is going to be a fine neutral matchup. The opponent's going to say swap into Wigglytuff, so I'm instantly going to respond with the Worm. I'm going to no-shield the first charge move, as I will resist everything they can possibly throw. However, of course, Icy Wind going to debuff my attack stat. I'm now going to go for a Rock Tomb, which is also going to debuff their attack stat. However, you can see the non-stat damage from these Mud Slaps, from the Rock Tomb, especially after a debuff to my attack stat, they're really not adding up that much over time. They go for a second Icy Wind. I'm going to look to overfarm just a little bit here and fire off the Rock Tomb just before they do reach another charge move. Rock Tomb gonna be no-shielded. I actually swap out there because I was double debuffed, and I realized it might be a double fairy team. However, I also realized that the energy on my Earthworm, or the Worm, sorry, is gonna be kind of useful, but also that Excadrill can probably core break the rest of their team. So they're gonna go for a Bulldoze there, unfortunately debuffing me, but we can go for a second Octazooka, and we actually grab a shield. Now, unfortunately, Octazooka does have a 50% chance to debuff their attack by 2 stages, and we threw 2 of them there, and unfortunately got a debuff on neither occasion, but we can still live a Bulldoze. They do, however, drop my defense, so I will definitely shield the next one. However, with that defense drop, it doesn't really make a huge difference, as Dunsparce obviously gonna be on roller as the fast move. That is gonna be double resisted and non-stab damage, so they can never farm me down. So at this point, I'm gonna look to go for a Drill Run. Drill Run gonna be shielded, gonna be no shielded, but we can now snipe with the Worm. We're going for the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb grabs the final shield, and the opponent does a great job of overfarming. However, it's just not going to be enough. Drill Run gets the KO, unless they've already got back-to-back charge moves, which I believe is impossible since they did just throw. We can go for one more Mud Shot, fire off Drill Run number 2, and Drill Run, all shields are down. It will be getting the KO up against the Dunsparce, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle. I'm going to see a shiny Fortress in the lead. So, not the best matchup for me. So, I'm actually going to swap out into my Orthworm, and we are going to see a Licky Licky. I just did what I mentioned in the start of this video. It called it Orthworm for some reason. I don't know why. I'm really struggling to say this Pokemon's name. So, anyways, we debuff them with the worm. We are now going to fire off another Rock Tomb, and it looks like we do win CMP. Rock Tomb should barely not get the KO. However, Shadow Ball, now double debuffed, also will not get the knockout. Shadow Ball is going to get us fairly low. They're going to swap out into a Shadow Quagsire, so I'm instantly going to swap into my Kingdra. We can go for a Swift just before they reach a potential Stone Edge, and the opponent is going to no shield. I am going to shield here. The opponent is going to full send the Stone Edge, and unfortunately, I won't be able to quite go for a full Dragon Breath farm down, but I can still outpace them to a Swift before they reach Stone Edge number 2. Now they come back in with the Fortress, and I'm just going to stay in and wait for them to throw some energy. The opponent going to go for a Sand Tomb there, which was honestly a little bit surprising. I thought maybe they'd go for a Rock Tomb instead, but either way, doesn't really matter. I fire off the Octazooka, I get the debuff, and this is going to force the opponent to swap out of that matchup. We come in, we get the perfect Mudshot farm down with the Shadow Excadrill, and of course they've got a lot of energy. I have to no shield one charge move, so I'm going to let the first one go through as Sand Tomb, going to deal the least amount of damage before they debuff my defense. We can now fire off the Drill Run, and the opponent, honestly, I don't think they do have quite back-to-back Sand Tombs just yet, so we use the shield. We can now outpace them to the next Drill Run, and of course, Drill Run from Shadow Excadrill gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle. I'm going to see Shadow Abomasnow in the lead. So, going to be a neutral matchup here. I can just barely outpace them by a single turn to the first charge move. So, I'm going straight for Swift, and they're going to no shield. Now, here, I was contemplating trying to catch a charge move. However, I didn't expect them to throw immediately. So, this time, I will be swapping out, and I'm able to catch a resisted Weather Ball. That's not going to do too much damage there, but they do come in and hard punish with a Shadow Swampert. Now, the worm is fairly bulky here, so I'm going to no shield, and I do just barely tank a Hydro Cannon. Not going to reach an Earthquake, but we get to the Rock Tomb, and Rock Tomb actually grabs a shield. Now I'm going to come back in with my Shadow Kingdra. I do, of course, double resist the water typing, so if they do go for a Hydro Cannon, especially since they're debuffed, I should live this. However, they do have access to Sludge, but the opponent just going to go for a Hydro Cannon anyway, so potentially on Earthquake as a secondary charge move. Either way, they're going to swap out into Azumarill, which unfortunately, whilst yes, I am double resisting the bubble damage, this is not a great matchup for me. We're going to go for another Swift here, and I believe they've got the energy for the Ice Beam. I swap out, I catch the move onto my Shadow Excadrill, where Ice Beam is still going to hit for neutral damage, but we can just barely reach a Drill Run before they bubble farm me down. Now, we are very low, so the opponent actually going to no shield. They come back in with the Shadow Swampert, and at this point, I kind of have to fish for a debuff with my Octazooka, and even then, despite the fact that if I do get the debuff, which I do, and I double resist the Hydro Cannon, this is Shadow on Shadow. Hydro Cannon still gets the KO, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there, into the next battle. I'm going to see another Fortress in the lead. This time around, I'm actually going to choose to stay in this matchup for a little bit. And again, they're going to go straight for a Sand Tomb, which is a little bit surprising to me. But either way, Sand Tomb, not going to deal too much damage there. I'm now going to swap out. And luckily for me, the opponent looks like they were trying to swap out and catch a charge move there onto their Florges. So at this point, we are, of course, going to no shield on the Worm, as that doesn't really deal much damage. And now we can fire back with a Rock Tomb. However, of course, they have debuffed my attack first, meaning we're dealing even less damage than we would normally. And we've already got non-stab charges where we're not really dealing that much damage. You could also opt to run Iron Head on this Pokemon. I feel like Earthquake is maybe slightly better coverage. However, honestly, maybe you should just run Iron Head on this Pokemon. Either way, they're going to come back in with the Fortress, and they can, of course, go for a Sand Tomb. Sand Tomb will get the KO from that range, and now we come in with the Shadow Excadrill. Now, I could no shield this, as we have already seen that I can live one. However, we don't know what they've got in the back just yet, so I might as well shield here. What I don't want to do is get extremely low, and then, of course, see like a Wigglytuff or something in the back. And the fact that they did swap into Florges, potentially they do have a double fairy backline. Either way, I'm going to swap out. I did swap out slightly early there. Maybe I should have tried and caught a Chilling Water, but either way, we're going to grab the final shield, and their final Pokemon is actually going to be a Licky Licky. So we go for Swift. Swift not going to deal much damage. However, what that might end up doing is allowing me to put me into range where I can just go for a Drill Run to get the KO. So I'm going to go and farm up, over farming here, going to throw on CMP with a potential Shadow Ball, and Drill Run gets the KO, and we're going to win CMP up against the Florges. Of course, they've got the Chilling Water, but it doesn't matter. Drill Run gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see Swampert in the lead. So this is going to be a great matchup for the Shadow Kingdra, and the opponent is going to choose to stay in initially and then go straight for the charge move. I'm going to no-shield this. The opponent actually goes for the Hydro Cannon. I do want to say as well, recently I have been streaming quite a fair bit, using a lot of nonsense teams, and unfortunately losing quite a lot of elo. So these are very low elo battles. I believe I am like sort of into the sort of mid 2100 elo range at this point, but I believe I did start these battles in the low 2000. But either way, we're going to see a Jellicent coming in. They go for the Shadow Ball, but I've already debuffed them, and now I can go for a second Rock Tomb debuff. Rock Tomb number 2, gonna get them fairly low. I don't necessarily need switch advantage here, so I will just let this move go through. The opponent gonna go ahead and full send another Shadow Ball, but now we can come in with the Kingdra and get a very aggressive farm down. But they do have a Wigglytuff in the back, so I'm gonna go for Octazooka, gonna do marginally more damage, looking for a debuff. We don't get the debuff, but the opponent banks some energy. They don't quite have a Swift loaded just yet, however, that is really important to note. So I'm gonna go for the Drill Run. The opponent gonna fire off a Hydro Cannon. I assume they're throwing straight away. I couldn't quite remember how much energy they had, but if we assume that was throwing straight away, we farm up to 5, we throw on CMP, winning CMP, and of course Wigglytuff still one charm away from a Swift, which means one more Mud Shot, we can barely outpace them. Drill Run gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's on there into the next battle. I can see Unova and Stunfisk in the lead. So this is going to be an okay-ish matchup for me, as of course we do have access to Octazooka, especially if we end up getting a debuff, that would be very nice. But they're actually going to swap out, maybe trying to catch an Octazooka onto their Dugong, not really sure. Either way, I'm going to swap out. I tried to catch a Icy Wind onto my Worm, but unfortunately, they do hold onto the energy. The opponent going to go for the Drill Run there. That does decent damage, but we win CMP with the Worm, and we can fire off the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb going to debuff their attack stat. I'm now just going to not bother shielding here. The opponent actually goes for an Icy Wind bait there, maybe expecting to grab a shield, and now we can just Mud Slap, farm them down. They come back in with the Stunfisk. I tried to go for the combo play, but the opponent actually throws, well, basically, as we swap out there, and unfortunately, they're going to get off a second discharge, which is really not ideal for me in the slightest. We're now going to go for the Octazooka. Octazooka is super effective, but it's not a very good charge move at all, so unfortunately, it doesn't quite put them into Dragon Breath farm down range, meaning I'm forced to throw the Swift. But the opponent then catches that brilliantly onto Gorgeist, and unfortunately, this is going to be a very problematic Pokemon for me to deal with now that Kingdra is basically dead, because Kingdra, yes, is going to double resist the non-stab Incinerate damage, but we are just so low where a single Incinerate will get the KO there. So we're going to come back in with the Kingdra, force him to throw the Seed Bomb. We can go for one Mud Slap and go for the Rock Tomb. However, you're going to see non-stab damage. This just doesn't do much at all to the Gorgeist, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle. I see Greninja in the lead. So a really positive matchup for the Kingdra, of course. Double resistant to fast move pressure. They swap out once again, looking to catch a resisted move onto the Jellicent. And we're going to come in with the Worm, and I'm just going to shield the first move, as of course, I can now go for a debuff with the Rock Tomb, making this matchup a lot more comfortable. Rock Tomb going to connect. It does decent damage, but unfortunately, it's never going to put them into range where I can Mud Slap farm them down, but they then go for a Bubble Beam there, which is really surprising. This should just also be another Bubble Beam. Even if it was a Shadow Ball, it wouldn't really matter too much. So at this point, since I'm double debuffed, I'm actually going to go for a slight undercharge here. This will allow me to go for a full Mud Slap farm down. Now, whether or not that actually helps me is a different question, because they're going to come in with a Gorgeist. We are now double debuffed here, but Rock Tomb actually going to be shielded by the opponent. However, we've only got resisted hits on the Shadow Kingdra, but I swap into my Kingdra, fishing for a debuff. Unfortunately, not getting it. But I kind of have to no-shield here. That Greninja does have quite a lot of energy. So I'm now going to fire for the Octazooka. Octazooka, this time around, is going to get the debuff, and that is going to allow me to no-shield here. They go for a Seed Bomb. I'm now going to look to try and make a catch here. The opponent actually swaps out and goes for the combo play themselves, going straight for the Night Slash. Night Slash gets the KO, but Kingdra, whilst incredibly low, we are still double resistant to fast move pressure, which means we can fire for one Swift. Swift number 1 grabs the final shield, but we reach a second Swift before they farm down. Swift number 2 gets the KO. We can Dragon Breath farm down the Gorgeist, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's into the next battle. We're going to see some of our battles with the Shadow Latios, and you're going to see this is just going to be a resisted Aura Wheel. So I'm going to no shield, and that nearly fully one-shots me. That is crazy damage. So I'm actually going to swap out there, assuming the opponent would try and snipe with something in the back, and they actually come in with a Licky Licky. Either way, I'm just going to go straight for a Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb, going to debuff their attack stat. They did actually farm up to 5 rollouts here, so I shield, and it ends up being the Earthquake. So that is a great shield usage. Now we can fire off another Rock Tomb, again throwing on CMP, winning CMP, and if they shield this, they're now double debuff. So whilst I do expect this to be another Earthquake, I'm just going to no shield, and whilst that is still super effective, it does decent damage. It's not quite enough damage to get the KO. So we're now going to come in with the Latios, snipe with the Aura Sphere, and let's see the opponent comes back in with the Mob Echo, but we can come in with our Shadow Extra Drill. Now, of course, the Latios single resist the Aura Wheel damage. This time we double resist it, so it should be a much more comfortable tank. I'm going to no shield. Aura Wheel still does over 50% of our HP. That is insane to see. Their final Pokemon is Talonflame. However, we've got 2 Pokemon with rock coverage. The opponent has already seen the Rock Tomb from the Worm, so they no shield, but we hit them with the Rock Side. We get the one shot. I'm able to Mud Shot, farm down the Mob Echo, and I'm able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see one of the worst things we could possibly see for this team, and it's only going to get worse for us as I'm going to no shield here. This opponent is now going to fire off a Mystical Fire. That is just so bad for me. They then swap into a second flying type Pokemon in the form of Corviknight. I go for Rock Tomb. We throw on CMP. Honestly, that doesn't really help me because now they're going to get quite an aggressive farm down here as the opponent not going to get a boost there with the Air Cutter, but they do get the full farm down anyways. Here, they are very likely going to go and full send a payback, which they do, but now we can look to overfarm quite massively, and if they do throw here, which they do, this is just going to be an Air Cutter, so I'm happy to no-shield this. I'm going to farm up a ton of energy. Honestly, I thought I was 2 Dragon Breaths away from an Aura Sphere and a Luster Purge, but actually just barely not, and I did not want to throw on Alignment, which forces me to overfarm more than I wanted to. And now, unfortunately, that's going to mean that Shadow Extra Drill can come in here, and we're just going to be outpaced to these Mystical Fires. They fire off the first one. I'm going to realize right now there is no way I get to another Rock Side before they get to another Mystical Fire, so I'm just going to not even bother wasting their time. I'm instantly going to concede the match. So, GG's top in there into the next battle. We're going to see a Tinkaton in the lead. We're going to be swapping into the Worm, and the opponent actually comes in with a Lapras, which is absolutely fine with me. Of course, we've got Rock Tomb for coverage. Rock Tomb going to do over 50% of their HP, and I definitely don't need to shield anything. Of course, I've just debuffed them there. Sparkling Aria does less than half our HP there, meaning even if they did outpace me to the next move, I could comfortably no shield, but we're just going to go straight for Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb gets the KO. If they come back in with the Tinkaton, they can go for Bulldoze, but Bulldoze, whilst it is super effective damage, it's non-stab, it's not a great move, it does not get the KO there. So the opponent actually swaps out into a Poison Sting Clodsire, which is absolutely fine with me. We can full send the Earthquake. Earthquake does huge damage. We can now come in with a Latios, and we're basically just fully sacrificing it, realizing it has minimal play into the Tinkaton, but now we set up a huge Mudshot farm down for the Shadow Extra Drill. Of course, all shields are still in play. However, we do have a slight energy advantage up against the Tinkaton. So the opponent just no shields. They recognize it's game over, and so we're able to take that game. So, GG's on there into the next battle. I see Togekiss in the lead. That is not great, and even worse, they're on Charm, so I'm forced to swap out there. We come in with the Worm, and we're met with a Quagsire, so things going from bad to worse here. I can no-shield this. They are going to go for an Aqua Tail. I'm now going to full send an Earthquake. Rock Tomb, of course, going to debuff their attack stat. However, it is, of course, resisted up against the ground typing, but unfortunately, Earthquake is also non-stab, so it doesn't really put them into range where I could flip this matchup here. So instead, we're just going to no-shield. We're going to come in with a Latios, but they still reach another Octail before they farm us down, or sorry, before we farm them down there, and we're also not going to leave with a Luster Purge either. So I'm going to swap out into Excadrill, and the opponent does have quite a lot of energy. I'm going to shield this, as of course it could be the Aura Sphere, which it is. I'm not going to wait to see what they do. They come in with their final Pokemon, and up against certain normal types, we do have a lot of play, because a lot of them are running Rollout as the fast move, but of course, up against the Furret, they're on Sucker Punch. It's hitting for neutral damage. It's dealing huge damage in the process. There's no point shielding here, so I'm just going to let this go through. They go for Trailblaze, boosting up the attack stat. They Sucker Punch, farm down the Latios, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Ferrothorn in the lead. So a positive matchup for me. I'm not going to throw it immediately here. The opponent just going to go straight for a Power Whip potentially. No, they're actually on Mirror Shot there, which does not get the debuff, but we do have to be slightly careful of that. So I'm going to go for the Aura Sphere, grab a shield, and then swap out into the Worm to catch the next Mirror Shot. Mirror Shot, again, not going to get the debuff. They swap out into Macargo, but we're on Mud Slap. We've also got Rock Tomb for coverage, which means we are going to grab the final shield from the opponent, and at this point, we're in a pretty good position. I'm just going to no-shield this. The opponent actually going to go for a Rock Tomb bait there, which does unfortunately set up quite a nice farm down for them. However, I assume they're going to blind throw a Rock Tomb. This is really risky, as this Pokemon did actually gain access to a well, not gain access to it, but it does have access to a buffed Heat Wave this season, which technically that could have been. However, it wasn't. We can go for the Aura Sphere, get the one-shot. We Dragon Rare, farm down Macargo. Their final Pokemon gonna be a Mud Slap Nidoqueen, but we're able to reach a Luster Purge. Luster Purge gets the one-shot there. Shadow Latios sweeping the entire team. So, GG's one there into the next battle. I see Shadow Latios into Greedent, so a decent matchup for me. However, I do have two Steel types in the back, so I'm actually going to swap into the Worm to catch a Resisted Body Slam. Of course, that's not going to deal much damage there, but the opponent's now going to come in with a Gastrodon, which certainly is not ideal. I'm going to full send the Earthquake once again, like the Quagsire, going to resist the Rock Tomb, but they actually end up shielding. They commit to a full Mud Slap farm down, and they're going to come out with a ton of energy, which is really bad for me. However, they overfarm. They allow me to reach an Aura Sphere on CMP, and we win the CMP tie. However, they're just going to double shield here. They're now going to offload tons of body slams. I'm just going to shield this just in case they're on Earth Hour. The opponent does just fire off another body slam. Here, I did consider trying to catch another body slam onto my Excadrill. However, that would just put me into range where they can might start farming down. I didn't think I was going to reach another Aura Sphere there, so forced to swap out. We do barely reach the Drill Run before they get to a Water Pulse. We get the KO, and up against a Wigglytuff, we are barely also going to reach a Drill Run. However, this is not enough damage to get the one shot. Can we get to an Aura Sphere? We actually get damage registration error, which is huge for me, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, as they can just Mud Slap, farm down with the Greedent, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there into the final battle of this video, leading into a Licky Licky, and I'm not really sure if they started lagging there initially. It's kind of hard to tell because it looks like they did kind of catch up in the end, but either way, we're going to fire the Aura Sphere, and Aura Sphere is going to be shielded. I'm also going to shield this as the opponent is going to full send a Shadow Ball, and now we're going to look to see if the opponent wants to try and make a catch. They don't end up catching, so Aura Sphere number 2 gets the KO. They're now going to come in with a Azumarill. I swap out straight away into the Worm, and the opponent's actually going to come in with an Ampharos, which is absolutely fine with me here. As of course, Mud Slaps, hitting for super effective. We go for Rock Tomb, we debuff their attack stat. This is only going to be a Brutal Swing or potentially a Thunder Punch here, so I'm just going to no shield. We get the full Mud Slap farm down. There's not much the opponent can do, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.